Experts called out to old tree? Then take closer look at what's beneath. The coastal town of Collooney in Ireland had been experiencing some worrying storms. Winds were so strong that homes were at serious risk as people nervously sheltered indoors. When the torrential weather finally calmed down, residents slowly emerged to assess the damage. And one prominent part of the small town attracted a lot of attention. Large trees had fallen victim to the gale-force winds and now lay on the ground with their long, twisted roots on display. Living by the coast, the residents of Collooney weren't strangers to destructive weather, and seeing trees blown down was commonplace. But it took months before they realized what one very special uprooted tree had unearthed. Collooney residents were dealing with the aftermath of a devastating storm, so they were focused on repairing roofs and clearing roads that had been ravaged by the 100 mph winds and heavy rain. The felled beech tree was certainly a sight to behold, but more due to its tremendous size rather than what had yet to be discovered lurking underneath it, until a dog walker got a little too close. It was a dog walker who had come to investigate the 215-year-old tree that had long since faded as a hot topic in the town. And his pooch was especially interested in the underside of the base of the trunk. After leaning in for a closer look at what had caught the animal's attention, the pet owner's eyes widened when he saw exactly what the dog was licking. He pulled out his phone and called the police immediately. Beech trees aren't actually native to Ireland, so a tree of this size was a rarity. The very fact that it was lying on its side in the first place was interesting enough, so no one could have imagined what the dog would sniff out from its roots. As excavations go, said Dr. Marion Dowd, who had been called in to investigate, this was certainly an unusual situation. When they saw what was underneath the enormous trunk, town authorities had no choice but to call in the experts. Marion and her team of archaeologists arrived in County Sligo, thinking this was probably another overzealous local historian thinking they'd uncovered the find of the century. But what the Sligo Leitrim Archaeological Services (SLS) scientists found underneath the tree was a genuine cause for alarm. With beech trees not coming to Ireland until the early 19th century, it's unlikely that whoever planted the natural behemoth in the town had any idea what they were growing the tree on top of, let alone actually preserving something of great historical interest. Marion took samples for examination right away. But the team was so busy excavating what was there, it didn't occur to them that there might be more. "There may be others in the area, we have no idea," she said. The skeleton they found was that of a young man between 17 to 20 years old. He was 5, 10, and probably worked a manual labor job, judging by the wear on his joints. Marion was grateful that she'd got to the site before the dog made off with the valuable bones, which had been split in two, the top half remaining in the roots and the bottom half in the ground. But the expert was still struggling to work out the source of the wounds on the body. The unknown man had suffered 2 stab wounds to the chest and 1 to his left hand. It was clear that he had been attacked with a knife while trying to flee from his assailant. The remains had been buried. As far as Marion was concerned, there were only 2 possible explanations for what had happened to him. Whoever planted this tree at the start of the 19th century must have had no idea of what was underneath, the scientists reasoned. Yet it was the planter or planters' actions that ultimately allowed this little piece of history to be unearthed over 200 years later. However, the archaeological magic still wasn't finished. Indeed, judging from the fact that the man was placed in a grave in an east-west position, hands folded over pelvis region, the scientists were given another clue. Marion said that the remains gave an insight into how difficult life was more than 900 years ago. This is the early medieval period, and we know that there were various conflicts and violence in this period, she said. We can assume he came from a farming background and one of the local settlements in the area. After he died, we know his family or community would have recovered the body and given him a form of Christian burial, and then 800 years later somebody planted a beech tree completely coincidentally on that spot. The case of the tree-dwelling medieval man is closed for now, with his remains finding their final resting place at the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin. While this is certainly an impressive find, and a very different one to what archaeologists like Marion are used to, Would you want to come across something like that while out walking the dog?